I'm testing a new setup here in the studio with some new technology and lighting, so let me know how that looks. But I thought I would test it doing something useful. And right now, internally, we're working on what we call a decision pod or a standard operating procedure for deciding whether to do a Roth conversion or not. When we did our podcast series on Roth conversions, must have been 6 months ago now, we're still getting tons of questions and clarifications on Roth conversions. It's a very complicated topic. It's a very popular topic. So I thought we could build a framework for how do you think through it in a logical way. So the first thing I want to say when we talk about Roth conversions is that this is an optimization decisions. So it pre-assumes that you've done the basics, which is have a vision, create a feasible plan focused on that vision, and then make it resilient. If you haven't done those things, those basics, and set the table, really we shouldn't be talking about Roth conversions at all. Ideally, a Roth conversion is, or any optimization decision, is to enhance a journey that's already pretty cool. And if you mess up this decision, it shouldn't materially impact your life in terms of living a rocking retirement. So let's talk about Roth conversions in a logical way so we can get to a place perhaps where you can make a great judgment on it. Now, little disclaimer here, because I'm going to post this publicly as well. I'm not your financial advisor. You need to talk to your financial advisor or your tax expert. This is helpful hints in education. But it's a logical way to think through a very complex problem. And that's what we want to do in an agile type of structure for retirement, is to make sure we're improving our decision making, because so many things become judgment calls. So let's take a look at a Roth conversion. So here we are on a mind map that we're using internally to flesh out what should this algorithm or standard operating procedure be when we're thinking about a Roth conversion. So obviously some of the reasons to make a Roth conversion is to diversify your asset location between after-tax, pre-tax, and tax-free dollars. A desire for future flexibility, which is something we don't think about a lot. If you end up doing a massive Roth conversion today, that may help you downstream, meaning later in life when you have a big purchase and you need money, but you don't want to have to take it out of pre-tax accounts for that big purchase because of tax or other reasons. Maybe you want to lower the burden to your heirs from a tax perspective, because most of this money is ultimately going to go to someone else. Perhaps you're just worried about future tax policies. Election year, hello, yeah, maybe that is one. Desire to decrease the RMD bombs. What do I mean by that? So you have required minimum distributions, and if you have over allocation to pre-tax assets like traditional 401ks or IRAs, then you could have massive required minimum distributions later on that might have downstream effects of increasing your taxable income in your 70s and 80s and beyond. Maybe you just want to be done with it. Maybe you just are tired of dealing with this, and why not pay the piper now? Because when it comes to tax management, and we forget this a lot, by the way, is it's not a matter of avoiding taxes most of the time. It's just a matter of timing. And Michael Kitts has taught me this long ago. Maybe if you're married, you want to take advantage of your joint tax brackets. Now, this is something we don't think about often, but it's probably pretty likely that one of you, if you're married, is going to be alive and the other one is not. And when that happens, God willing, not for a long time, you're going to go from joint tax brackets to a single tax bracket, which means the surviving spouse will run up the tax brackets and end up paying higher tax sooner than joint brackets. And then maybe if we're in a bear market and your assets are depressed at the moment from a value perspective, maybe that's an opportunity to convert at lower rates. So those are some of the reasons that we think about when we're considering doing a Roth conversion. But boy, this is a complex decision, not complicated, complex decision. You're not going to get it right. You're not going to get it wrong. I think the best that you can do is to make sure you think through this in an organized way so you can make a judgment call. And there's some universal truths here that we need to remember. One is that this is optimization. This is just enhancing. It's not going to change the quality of your trip in terms of a great life if you've done the basics that we talked about. Two is that regardless of all the spreadsheets you might create or analysis you do, you can only make a decision for this year and maybe for next year. Those are the ripe bananas. When you start to think out 5, 10 years in your Roth conversion strategies, those are green bananas. You can make those decisions later. Better to focus on what can I do this year or next year when we're thinking about Roth conversion strategies. And third is your preferences are going to change over time. So how do you think about this in an organized way so you can feel confident in your judgment? Well, we like to use what's called the OODA loop. Scott Sanborn on our team taught me that. He is a career Army, retired as a colonel. And OODA loop comes from aviation, specifically fighter pilots. And it's about observing is the first O, getting a lay of the land. 2 is orienting where you're at relative to what you've observed, and then deciding and then acting. So that's a good logical framework to think about decisions. And we use that construct when we're creating decision pods in the Rock Retirement Club or in thinking about it in our practice and going through this actually with clients. So let's use that OODA loop framework to think logically about a Roth conversion, and maybe you can adapt some of this to have more confidence so you're not just doing what the expert of the day is telling you to do or doing a guess intuitively. So let's go to an OODA loop. I'm going to go back to my mind map, and we're going to go down here to, should I do a Roth conversion? Let me get down there. Here we are. Should I do a Roth conversion? So let's go through this OODA loop structure. And this is what I built this internally as we have built out our algorithm or decision pod for making this decision. The first question is, let's observe. So let's go to observe. I'm going to focus in here so I can make it simple for you. First is, do you have a retirement plan of record? Do you have your first draft of this is my retirement plan of record that funds your base great life, meaning you have an income floor and you have an upside and you have a contingency, and you can run tax projections once you have this retirement plan of record. And I actually can't stress this enough. You shouldn't be talking about Roth conversions unless you have some plan of record of what our current draft is of how our life is going to work. That basics again. Because if you don't have that, you're making decisions in a cloud. You don't really have anything to grab onto. The second is, we want to observe, what is your tax filing status? Are you filing single, head of household? Are you filing married? Are you married? No? Okay, great. Well, not great. I don't know. But anyway, yes, if you are, then what is the relative health and life expectancy of the two partners? Because that could influence whether we are a little bit more concerned about going from joint brackets to individual brackets. So we want to observe this. We're not making decisions. We're just setting the table to start to make some judgment calls. What tax bracket are you in now or will you be in? So what tax bracket do you project yourself to be in? So that's going to be doing a tax estimate for this year. What about your projected income and tax brackets, let's say for the next 5 years? That's the default that we use. We do 5-year cash flow estimates. That way we can have a sense for what the taxable income looks like over the next 5 years. That can help you identify when you get to the orient stage, what will your projected required minimum distributions be after you fund your base great life with the current draft of the retirement plan of record? Are those required minimum distributions going to be above your needs? Will it, well, it should be throw you, so you can see this is a draft, will that throw you into IRMA surcharges with Medicare? What will your future projected tax rate look like? Now, you can do a basic calculation. Normally what we do is we take the value of, let me go back over here for a second. We take the value of your tax deferred assets and your age, and we just use a flat 5% projected return on those assets. We back out any monies we know we're going to be taking out between now and then project using current life expectancy tables of what your first year and beyond required minimum distributions will be. And that will give you a sense, hey, am I going to be taking out more money than I need later on? And is that going to cause me some tax problems? I literally am dealing with a case right now with a long-term client whose husband passed. Even while he was alive, they were taking more required minimum distributions than they needed. And it was so frustrating for them because it threw them into different tax brackets. And now, and now that one spouse passed, the situation's exacerbated because in this case, she is in a single tax bracket. Let me get some water here. So it's a good idea to project what those are. But let's go back to our mind map here. We just want to observe these things. We're not making any decisions. Next thing we want to observe is when we look at our financial assets, how are they positioned? If we have $1 million, let's say, how much do we have in after-tax assets? That's like your bank accounts, joint savings accounts, etc. How much do we have in pre-tax accounts? Those are traditional IRAs, traditional 401ks. And how much do we already have in tax-free accounts? That might be Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, maybe HSA accounts. And we can look at and the other thing we want to observe here, by the way, is if we consider a Roth conversion, what's the impact to our after-tax allocation? Because if you end up doing a Roth conversion and paying taxes from your after-tax assets, maybe you don't have any after-tax assets left, and that could cause some downstream effects. Next thing you want to observe is, what are your legacy plans? Who is this money really for? What is your charitable intent? A good example here would be, if you plan on giving a lot of this money away to charity, well, you could do qualified charitable distributions from your pre-tax IRA, and that would reduce your future RMD, so maybe that solves part of the problem. Observe, what is your current perception of future tax rates? Maybe you're extremely worried about that. I can understand that. We all are to some extent, but you'll have to measure that and decide whether it's worth hopefully having two birds tomorrow by paying more tax today. And then again, are we in a bear market? So these are our initial, I think we've evolved this from this, but this is what you might do in the observe stage. You're just setting the table to get a lot of facts in front of you. Okay, so let's get out of observe and let's go to orient down here. And initially, this is how we structured it, and we're playing with this. When you're orienting, now it gets to what they call commander's intent. What is my intent in all of this? And I think, where's the book? Call Sign Chaos, great book. That's where I learned this concept of, if the commander's intent might be take the bridge to stop the retreat of the enemy. Well, the intent is to stop the retreat. The tactic is to take the bridge. Really, all they care about is stopping the retreat. So what is your intent when you're considering Roth conversions? It's important let me rephrase. The better you can identify that, the more confident you're going to be in the decision. When that's a little bit wishy, that can be a little hard. So how do we define our intent? Well, we got to go through orienting ourselves now that we have the table set. And you're going to orient yourself under two domains, qualitative and quantitative. So let's look at the qualitative first. Do you have charitable desire? That's going to influence that, because ultimately, when you're thinking about Roth conversion, your other options are leave it, do qualified withdrawals, or do qualified charitable distribution. What is your view? This will determine how aggressively you might act on Roth conversions. What do you want to accomplish? What is the end in mind in doing this in the first place? Is it for legacy? Is it to lower RMDs so you or your surviving spouse, if you're married? Is it, I just want to get it out of the way and I can take my bird in the hand, pay my taxes and my medicine right now, and de-risk the future when it comes to tax to some extent? Just be done with it. Lock in your joint rates. Maybe that is part of your intent. And you want to think about these. And these are qualitative. They're just going to be judgment calls. You want to have future flexibility for large expenses. So if you have to take a lot of money out, you can take it out of a Roth so you don't create a tax problem later if you took it out of a traditional IRA. Maybe it's you want to reduce the tax burden for your heirs. rate these and prioritize them so you know which ones are sort of your key decisions and which ones are, yeah, that's sort of cool, but I'm not that worried about that. That's important to conceptually and maybe just put them on a scale of 1 to 10 and rate them real quick. And once we build the decision pod for the for the Rock Retirement Club, we'll have a rating system so people can go through this. I'm doing this for the pie cake right now. All right, so that's the qualitative. What might you want to orient on the quantitative, excuse me. Okay, let me get focused on that again. Unfocus there, enter focus here. Your current tax estimate. Understand what that is and what that will be. Will you pay taxes? Will your paying taxes drain your after tax? You want to identify that. Compare alternate strategies. And this is a big thing. And this is one reason why you really want to have a retirement plan of record, because that will give you something to create what if scenarios. So let's assume your retirement plan of record is the traditional way: drain your after-tax assets, then drain your pre-tax assets, then go to tax-free assets. That's the general structure that is a default. Well, build a plan that shows that, and then you can figure out your projected income and tax for this year and next year, et cetera. Then you can create, well, what if I do Roth conversions up to the 24% tax bracket or what have you over the next 3 or 4 years? So here in this orient stage, you want to start creating these what if scenarios so you can, again, observe this path versus this path. Is there enough money on the table there in projected lifetime tax, let's say, to pursue this? So let's go back to our mind map. And then you can create what if scenarios of doing Roth conversions, and you can structure that in different ways. Maybe using qualified distributions to fund life, because that is an option. And another is doing QCDs, which is qualified charitable distributions. You can create what if scenarios. And then you can also gauge, and this is part of orienting, what are you trying to solve for? Because if you do Roth conversions, if you're under 65, well, that may increase your ACA tax credits significantly. Maybe you're paying nothing now. All in, without any subsidy, you're going to pay about $1,000 a month per person. At least that's roughly what we pay. So you have that. Is it worth doing Roth conversions if you're going to have higher insurance costs today? Or if you're 63 or after, is it worth doing Roth conversions now because you're going to have not just higher ACA credits, but also IRMA Medicare surcharges? You can see how you need to have a framework to figure this out, because I'm getting confused just talking about this stuff. And then quantitatively put some numbers to, well, what projected tax bracket might I be now that I know what my projected required minimum distributions are going to be? These are the things that you want to organize and orient yourself so you can get down to, well, what's more important to me? My ACA tax credits today or decreasing tax for my heirs? The fact that I'm worried about single brackets and I'm comfortable just paying my taxes today. You're not going to get this right. You're not going to get this wrong. This is going to be a judgment call. And I would run away from anybody that think they know exactly what the answer is. The point of this exercise is to go through it in a logical way so you can make the judgment call based on the information that you have today. That's why we're only dealing with ripe bananas here, the decisions that you're going to make today. Okay, so those are some of the things. And again, this is a draft of what we're building as an algorithm, so it's always a work in progress. So let's go back to our mind map. Now that we've done that, let's get out of focus here. Now we need to decide. Now, what is it? The root of decide means to cut off other options. And what is it? I can't think of the word. Doing this on the fly. What do you need to decide? Now, do you need to decide your Roth conversion strategy for the next 6 years? No, you can have a model that shows it. Really, you're just focused on the ripe banana, not the ones that aren't ripe yet, which is, what are you going to do this year? How much will you do? Why are you going to do it? how much tax will you pay, how will you pay the tax, and then you want to log your decision. And again, in our decision pod for the club, we're going to build a framework so you can actually log your decision, explaining your rationale, and then schedule your next assessment, which will likely be the next year because you're building this yellow brick road of Roth conversions in this instance as you go. But you just got to make a judgment call. You relax, look around, that's observing and orienting, and then make a call. So that's the decision. And the reason you want to log this with the rationale, by the way, is because 1 or 2 years from now, 3 years, 4 years from now, you're not going to remember. And you're going to look back at yourself and say, wow, I was really smart, or what the heck was I thinking in doing that? And so this will help you understand the logic behind your decision. And again, the goal here is organized decision making. And then the last one is ACT, which is pretty straightforward if we go back to that, which is execute, 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 log your decision and your reason, and then go through the logistical parts of executing the Roth conversion for the strategy. So the way that we do this now in our practice is we're always talking about this in our normal agile huddles that we have, but it really comes down to Q3 and Q4 where we're making a decision for that year. And the pathways are different for everybody. Sometimes we're solving for ACA tax credits. Sometimes we're solving for massive Roth conversions. Sometimes it's a lot of in between. And that's just the nature of doing a lot of this decision making. That's why I think it's so important that we focus not on all the nitty gritty of the tactics, but on how do we do this in an organized way. So hopefully this helped you organize yourself so you can feel more confident in the decision making that you're making. And give me feedback on how the switching worked to the mind map and the lighting and everything else. So I've done my job. I'm excited for you. Remember, Roth conversion or not, it shouldn't matter when you rock in retirement.